PH side has always said that there's one red line we won't cross, which was the whole 1MDB case.
Was it something that was publicly stated by any PH leader, or is it something that we think should be the red line? I don't think they've come out to explicitly say this. The red line is we won't free Najib. Boys and girls, to the final episode of the Are We OK podcast for 2024. I am Dr. Botak or OKM and
I'm Mr. Money Peter.
Peter, so before we wrap up 2024, there's been some interesting news. Of course, we always have interesting news in Malaysia, especially politics news. This is what we talk about here, politics and public policy, in ways that are accessible to you guys. So what has captured the public interest over the past week or so?
I think over the past week, one of the things that really captured the headline was Rosmah's acquittal, right, in that sense. Not just that, also Zahid as well. I think this has really caught the headline because...
Especially Rosmah,
Especially Rosmah's one. Why is it so? Is because I think for a very long time when we were campaigning for the change of government at that time, and even after the new government took over, there were a lot of toleration that were being made to form the current government. And time again, the current coalition,
the unity government,
especially on the side of PH side, has always said that there's one red line we won't cross, which was the whole 1MDB case. And this, in a way, kind of involves Rosmah as well.
Okay. Maybe let me just stop you there, right? The red line, right? Was it something that was publicly stated by any PH leader, or is it something that we think should be the red line? As far as I can recall, neither PKR or DAP has really come out to say, or even PM has come out to say that, the red line is we won't free Najib.
That's right.
Right? I don't think they've come out to explicitly say this. I myself have gone on to other podcasts, including Keluar Sekejap, to say that I think that the red line for DAP is freeing Najib. Freeing Najib can take on different forms and shapes. Of course, if let's say it comes in the form of a total pardon for Najib, of course, this government will say this is the prerogative of the king. PH supporters will come back to say that as PM, as the government, you have powers of recommendation, right? So I would say that in the minds of the PH supporters, I think this is the red line. In the minds of many of the PH leaders themselves, this is the red line meaning freeing Najib, but it has not really been publicly stated.
Right.
Which is why I think when the case involving Rosmah, and just to be clear, Rosmah has already been convicted over a bribery issue, which is this solar project called Jepak, or involving a place in Jepak called Sarawak, that is supposed to cost the government over R1 billion. Right, so she has been convicted of that. She's waiting appeal now. This recent acquittal is over, I think, 7 million ringgit or so in money transfers and different kinds of financial transactions. So the reading of it is, I think when people read this without knowing the details of the other cases, right, they would read this and say, hey, this is going to be the same as what happened to Zahid. And this is part and parcel of a deal that Prime Minister Anwar and maybe Pakatan Harapan has made with UMNO to try to slowly but surely let Rosmah go and then later get a full pardon for Najib. Right? So I think that is the sort of like beginning of this kind of discussion, or maybe it's even in the process of being implemented for Rosmah and Najib. And that's why there was a FMT report that came out a couple of days ago quoting two DAP leaders. One is a senior DAP leader. The other one is Adun, both anonymous, saying that PH really needs to come out to explain this because this is a very sensitive issue for PH supporters. Just to be clear, I am not the anonymous DAP leader. I'm not a senior leader in DAP anymore. I'm just a normal DAP member. And if I want to say something, I would...
Say it over the podcast.
Say it over the podcast, not remain anonymous. But the fact that two DAP leaders were quoted shows that this is, I think, an issue that is really important to PH and especially DAP support.
Again, I feel like this whole thing about from Zahid all the way to Rosmah and from Najib's side, right? I feel that there should be a lot more communication be made rather than it came out as a surprise and just shock everyone. Why do I think so? Is because, number one, this is a very sensitive topic. All of us know it. And to a certain extent, actually, let's also face the truth. Malaysians are forgetful. The key is how do you prep the people to accept something. And now I'm not saying that it's right. Let's put the moral part of it aside first.
Okay.
But I think the pure sense of shock is not a very good way of handle it. They tend to just leave things to keep going, and then suddenly when people start complaining, only they want to handle. I feel like there should be much more proactive stance towards it. Like, for example, PH could have earlier just stated this very clearly and say that, look, we've already done our part, we already brought him to the court, we already gathered evidence. Now, the rest from here, it's up to the judge, it's up to the king whether he want to pardon him, right? And from now, we've already done our part, yet we'll fight for justice. Now, I thought if you just say it like that, right, it will be quite a good statement to make, right? Now, whether are you truly involved or not, I think, honestly, all this will end up being conspiracy theory. Because at our normal human level, even I would say that unless you're at the top level, it will remain as a shrouded rumor, generally.
Okay, so I have a few responses to that. I think what you say about the communication strategy is spot on. Because I want to remind our audience, when the decision by the Pardons Board on Najib came out, where his sentence was reduced by half from 12 years to 6 years, and he got a big discount on his fine, right? There was sort of like radio silence on the part of the government, including Anwar and the Federal Territories Minister for a few days. Nobody wanted to say anything. And this was when a lot of conspiracy theories came up. And because there wasn't very clear sort of like communications on the part of the government, it led to more conspiracy theories coming up when this so-called addendum came out from the previous king to say that he wanted Najib to undergo house arrest. And this is something that's being played up also by UMNO people to say that why didn't we follow the previous king's instructions, even though the whole issue of house arrest may not have been so applicable for somebody like Najib, even now, right? Even now. And that's why there's a bill now to propose a house arrest for certain types of prisoners, right? So that's one thing. That communications with regards to Najib, Rosmah has never really been very clear under this government. A second thing is, we cannot help but have this impression that PM Anwar is having mixed signals or sending mixed signals, right? Because when the Rosmah judgment came out, one of the things that he said during when reporters asked him after he launched Kit Siang's book in Ipoh, he said that after 2018, a lot of cases were prosecuted in a rush. There was a lot of venom and things like that, right? Then I would think to myself, actually, Tommy Thomas took his time in terms of getting the cases together. That's why some of the cases were quite robust, like the SRC case that resulted in his conviction, and also the Jepak case that resulted in Rosmah's conviction. And this was what your supporters wanted. They wanted to see justice. So that's one thing. The other thing is, this is where I think the mixed signals comes in. You say a lot of things were done out of venom, vengeance and all that. But when you become Prime Minister, who are the people that you go after? You go after Daim, you go after Mahathir and his kids, asking Mahathir's kids to produce their asset declaration from way back starting from 1980. Is that not venomous? Is that not something that seems very vindictive? Is that not something that seems to be using or abusing the same system that was used against you when you were sacked from your position as Deputy Prime Minister and also Deputy President of UMNO? Right? So, I mean, the Malaysian public is not stupid, right? They can see, they can sense, they can hear. Right, and we are living in a much more transparent and open media environment compared to before, right? So when you say things like that, coupled with the fact that you have poor communications, all these conspiracy theories, which may have some truth in it, will continue to roll down the hill.
Yeah, and I think the fact that after he said that also, it kind of put himself in not that good a light. Because so he did all that out of vengeance. It wasn't for justice suddenly. You get what I'm saying, right?
Well, that is Anwar's narrative.
Correct. It suddenly became an admission of guilt per se.
Well,
you get what I mean?
Yeah, but it is blaming Mahathir. Blaming Mahathir, maybe blaming Tommy Thomas. While in actual fact, I think many of PH supporters would have supported the way in which the prosecutions of Najib and Rosmah were underway.
Yes, I thought it was done quite well. Now, another thing that actually came out of it was subsequently his response. He said that, that's why now the cabinet actually approved of the separation of power between prosecution, judiciary and executive, right? Yeah.
More to do with the separation of prosecutorial powers of the Attorney General's chambers. Separate that from the administrative part whereby the Attorney General will support the government. Attorney General's chambers would help the government draft legislative bills and things of that nature. So the prosecutorial part can have that kind of independence, which hopefully will allow that office to continue doing its job regardless of which party is in power. That is what he is saying that will go on soon, which is something that PH has been advocating for in the past.
My thought was also on this, right? Finally, he said that, oh yeah, this has been approved and it will be tabled soon, you know? And I thought to myself, how timely it is, right? Why is this something that has been a concern for many Malaysians for the longest of time and it was ignored?
This government has been in place for 2 years.
Yeah. And now suddenly you say like that. Now, definitely, I don't even know whether is he saying it because the mic is pointed at him or is there really such a thing? Because I believe if there was such thing being in place, I believe there would have been a lot of coverage to start off with.
I think that the discussions have been ongoing. This is under the Law Minister Azalina Osman's purview. She has sent mixed signals on this as well in terms of whether or not it can go ahead.
That's right.
I think finally, if let's say PMX does follow up with what he has promised on this issue, we would see some movement on this maybe in the middle of the year.
Right.
But if it's one of those things where the PM just throw out because he wants to defend his government in light of these Rosmah acquittals, then middle of the year may come and then Azalina may come and say, actually, it's very hard to do. And then they'll kick the can down the road again.
This begs another question. Right? I mean, number one, it doesn't make him look good. I have to say that because it kind of like very murkily also state that yeah, this is part of the reason kind of thing, right? So it's like, oh, so yeah. I think this begs another question. If because of all this, we really can push this bill past, then we have a very interesting, I would say, a philosophical or ethical question, which you would know better. I think there's always this idea that if you have to do something bad to result in the greater good, is that right or wrong? And I think you have multiple times faced this previously within your time that was much more active in politics circle as well. Sure. I recall the time that you guys pushed through the anti-hopping and everything all in exchange.
The confidence and supply agreement, exchange for supporting the government.
That's right. So, I mean, we all definitely can agree that to a certain extent, certain good things has to be accomplished with certain amount of sacrifice.
You have to compromise, yes,
you have to
politics.
compromise, right? The question, how much of compromise?
My sense is that when you compromise, right, what is important from a philosophical perspective is that you must know where your moral compass is. Meaning, you know that even if you compromise, your moral compass, and this is in terms of individual moral compass and also the party's moral compass and the coalition's moral compass, isn't running too far away from, for lack of a better word, reformacy kind of a spirit, institutional reform trajectories and desires. Once you start using the argument that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or that we need to do a bit of evil for the greater good, you start going down that slippery slope. And then your moral compass also goes down that slippery slope. So before you know it, that has a momentum of its own. And my fear is that when this kind of thinking pervades this administration, what will happen is that the compromises that PH makes along the way will make it more like the BN or the UMNO of the old.
That's right.
Right, and this is what some people are seeing happen within this administration. Right, so for example, the amendments for this Communications and Multimedia Act 1998, which we talked about, is something that PH, if it was in opposition, would never have supported. Never. Would have criticized it. It would have organized demonstrations, organized forums. But now, in government, all this is acceptable, partly because we want to defend the people from child pornography. We want to defend the people from getting scammed.
Yeah.
Right. So that becomes the narrative of all these amendments that have been proposed. And that's just one example. That's the fear that I have. That's the fear that many PH supporters have, which I think you also probably can see where that is going, right?
No need to be a PH supporter to be fearful of that.
Correct.
I think anyone should be.
Yes.
Yeah, and as you were mentioning about the Multimedia Act, right? And this is something that I noticed, right? Nowadays, you would come across many news. For those of you who are scrolling your TikTok, whatever, you see a lot of it, like a lot of interviews talking about the danger of child pornography. And somehow this being highlighted like nobody's business at this point. A lot of rape cases and whatnot, they all related back to child pornography. And somehow, to a certain extent, you feel like there's almost a very intentional highlight of this issue. And I was thinking to myself, this issue is not new in Malaysia,
Exactly.
Child pornography has been in Malaysia for the longest of time. during the time when we were talking about underage marriage and all these kind of things, it was one of those issues that were very pervasive, but it wasn't being highlighted. It wasn't being taken care of. And now suddenly there's a Multimedia Act, and the whole angle of this Multimedia Act is like as if it is for this whole thing's sole reason. And the truth is, the Multimedia Act, if you just want to target pornography, it could have easily just reworded specifically towards pornography.
Some provisions and some articles did, but they also increased the punishment for a lot of other things.
Correct. They're throwing a bunch of things. So now it's kind of like, how do I say, right? It's kind of like if we were trying to make Malaysian healthier, therefore we are going to prevent people, or I would say that we want to reduce the intake of Malaysian towards sugar. But what the government did is a blanket ban of sugar. There will be no sugar product allowed in Malaysia. Let's say you do that. You come to the point of like, is it really
effective?
Yeah, is it really effective? And are you really just trying to target for health purpose, or you have gone a little bit beyond and it would just in the end backfire?
Correct. So I think this is the part where many people in civil society also feel very uncomfortable with, because it almost seems as if you are against this CMA amendments, the Communication and Multimedia Act 1998 amendments, you are sort of like
allowing child
pornography, right? Of course, that's not the case. And there have been a couple of NGOs and also coalitions that have come out to say that, yes, you want to strengthen the punishments against people who are doing child pornography and all that. There are other laws that you can strengthen. Specific laws dealing with harassment of children and also sexual harassment and things like that. Just strengthen those, right? You don't necessarily need to go down this path.
Set up a special committee that specializing in investigating this area also can,
Sure, yeah.
Whatever not for optics.
And some of these may not only be for optics. You may want to strengthen the cybersecurity arm of the police, strengthen, the MCMC capabilities, in this area. But what instead we see is after the act has been passed, before it's even been gazetted, you have somebody like Fahmi Reza being hauled up, right? For sort of like offences against Section 233 of the Communications and Multimedia Act. The very thing that was sort of like used in the past against activists, against even some politicians, right? Which led to the call, including my successor in Bangi, Sharizan, to ask for Section 233 related activities not to be sort of like used as a reason for going after activists until there's more clarity with the passing and the gazetting of these amendments. But one thing, again, this is not just a philosophical issue, but from a more practical administrative issue. If let's say, what Anwar Ibrahim said, PMX said, actually, I don't think Fahmi Reza should be charged, right? First of all, if let's say there's independence in terms of the in terms of the Attorney General chambers and also the PMO, he cannot influence kononnya, right? Right. Second thing is he should ask the question: why is it that MCMC is still using this thing to go after people like Fahmi Reza?
That's right.
Right. Is there something fundamental within MCMC that needs to be changed? If let's say there is, why is it the fact that the executive chairman of MCMC, he has been reappointed to that role? As of, I think, a couple of weeks ago, he has been reappointed to that role for maybe another 2 to 3 years, with no specific instruction coming from either the minister or from Anwar with regards to trying to reform MCMC so that it can be a more responsible regulator, including going after the people who are doing pornography scams and all that we support, but also having the wisdom to be able to separate those things from satire, from political criticisms that's legitimate and whatnot. Nothing. And in fact, this is a communications message, right? So it goes back to what you were saying just now. No communication strategy or just trying to be maybe willfully ignorant of all these prerogatives that should be pursued.
So I think that's definitely one disappointing part that we have seen so far. And in a way, it's also the highlight of the year to a certain extent, at least one of it. My question to you also is this, right? Because for me, I've always been a bystander, just watching, talking, nowadays commenting. But in your case, it is very different. You have been an active member, and definitely over the past 1 year, you chose to also not be too involved. And what do you think is going to happen moving ahead? Because as we said, it is a slippery slope. I don't think UMNO or BN started out the way it is. And as you were saying about it, I was thinking to myself, probably in the early days when Mahathir was the PM that time, there were certain things that happened not because he did not know, but that was the most easiest and convenient way to get things done. So I was watching this show called The Auditor on Netflix. It's a Korean show. It was about how this big organization has so much of corruption in it. And this auditor went in and then started checking out things and stuff like that. And it talked a lot about systematic corruption, right? And many of it was probably like started off quite easily from the fact that, oh, this guy's been working with me for 10 years, and since I can't afford to pay him super well, I close one eye on
Let him do what he wants outside.
Yeah, and anyway, he is very effective. And it gets my thing done. And when things are changing, when it's really, really difficult, instead of me spending three whole months convincing everyone in the world, I got this guy who's super loyal, who can execute everything. So why not give him a little bit more power? In a way, as a bystander, we are seeing more and more of this starting to play out within, I would say even DAP, within PH, right? Within the unity government.
Let me respond to this in a way that maybe is not so politically correct. Again, I speak my mind, I focus on public policies. I would say that what is happening now within this unity government is the case whereby you are rewarding loyalty for the sake of loyalty, not even because of good performance. Right? Because your case is, okay, I reward loyalty, the guy gets things done. In this case, under this unity government, I think loyalty is rewarded on the most part. Performance may not necessarily be prioritized. That kind of sentiment is there. And if let's say that sentiment goes on, which is what you are trying to hint at, what will happen is, over time, political loyalty trumps performance.
That's right.
Meaning, it's okay. You are not maybe the best performer, but because you are loyal, I will give you an appointment to be a stat board head. Later on, maybe give you a chance to become deputy minister. If you perform well, okay, that's a bonus. But more important is that you must be loyal to me. You must be loyal to whatever it is that the party is and the coalition is trying to achieve. Meaning, we are here to stay in power. I think that is the dangerous part.
If let's say we were to measure it in such a way, right? Let's just do a very simple one. 10 out of 10 being that it is literally at the level where it's a systematic problem already, and 0 being it is still at that very righteous stage like that. Oh, we're
can take the moral high ground and all that.
Moral high ground kind of thing. But where do you think this current government is standing at, in your personal opinion?
I would say that it is more on the 6 level. That means on the way downhill already, on the way to the 10 already.
Started to slip already.
Yes, correct. And I would say for maybe for DAP, I would say we're still around 5, right? And teetering on a balance. One of the things that we didn't discuss before in detail is the fact that for the amendment of the Communications and Multimedia Act, right, the vote was very close, 59-40. This government has a 2/3 majority, meaning that there were many MPs from PH side, including some from DAP, chose not to show up to support this amendment because they themselves felt uncomfortable about supporting it, right? So something to think about, something to reflect upon as we end this session, and then we'll come back and talk about our more general reflections on 2024, especially pertaining to this podcast. Be right back. Welcome back to the Are We OK podcast, the podcast that talks about politics and public policies in ways that are accessible to you, the person on the street. It's December 2024 now. We started this podcast in December 2023, not knowing where it would take us to in terms of direction, in terms of subscribers. But I think, it's been quite an enjoyable process for me. We've hit 31,500 subscribers. So for those of you who haven't subscribed yet, please smash the subscribe button so that we can continue to bring you good content and also get good quality sponsors to come in to make the show production even better, maybe take it even on the road. But yeah, Peter, what has been your impression so far?
So far, it's been good. I think this is one of the highest engagement podcast shows that we have. And I still recall when I first approached you with this topic, this whole idea of a podcast. It's been a great 1 year, I would say. I've been walking up the streets and people would approach me and they would say that, hey, I've been following Are We OK? And the other day I was just scrolling through the podcast chart on Spotify, and Are We OK is also there.
Not too bad. Yeah.
More importantly is many people actually do wait for the next episode. Like they'll say that, hey, when's the next episode coming out? And what many people do not know, I'll just take this time to promote very, very quickly. What people do not know is this. The episode is feed to you via algorithm. So you have to hit the subscribe, you have to hit the notification button. Then it'll be sent to you.
Yep.
Yeah, if not, then it will be depending on your watching habit during that period.
So it's quite interesting in terms of our subscribers. I've been approached by people who are in their like 60s, 70s and say, hey, you know, I watch your show. Are we okay? You know, very interesting insights and that kind of stuff. And then we have people who are quite young. You know, I've been approached by a couple of Taylor students,
Yes.
asking to take a picture with me and saying that, hey, you know, I watch Are We Okay podcast, right? So I think it's good that we have that kind of diversity. My sense is that probably our audience is skewed more towards males who are interested in politics and policies. But I think we hope to be able to get maybe more female guests to come on the show as well to talk about things from a different perspective. Our first guest, I'm not sure whether you remember, was actually a lady, Kusha, from YB Rajiv's office, Rajiv, the Adun for Bukit Gasing. We hope to be able to get more diverse guests from different backgrounds. And we've had a few. You know, we've had Saifuddin Abdullah coming from the PN side, Bersatu side. We've had Howard Lee and also Rajiv coming from DAP side, one MP, one Adun. And they didn't get in trouble with the party for coming on the podcast. We've had people from Bersih, we've had academics, come in to talk about not just local politics, but politics in Indonesia, for example. Any sort of guests that you would like to see come on this podcast in 2025, maybe?
If you can get Kari Jamaluddin or Sharil up, it'll be quite fun. Yeah, that for one. On the other hand, I think it'll be cool to bring back some of your previous comrades, those who have been working alongside very closely with you, like Hannah and Bihin and Niching. Yeah, you guys were the original group of first new blood in that sense in DAP during that time.
Okay.
I thought it'd be cool if you guys can gather and then have a chat and share those days. Less looking forward because it gets complicated, but rather more looking backwards.
I think the audience will be more interested in looking forwards. Or maybe asking them to share their thoughts about their challenges and also opportunities within the current government. So we can think about that. Yeah.
Those are all part and parcel of it. Definitely getting opposition leaders to come over and talk and opening up for some of a policy debate space. Because I do find that the way that we have very consciously make this show was to not make political sensation or headline sensation as our priority, but rather more of a stronger policy debate kind of thing.
Yes, more education,
right? So I thought it'd be quite cool if, let's say, we can have certain leaders from different parties coming together and then speak about it, and then we can kind of play a moderation kind of role, right? And let them debate it.
One of the things I wanted to do was to organize a debate between Wong Chin Huat and James Chin on the issue of seat allocation between Peninsular Malaysia and also East Malaysia. That's more of an academic debate, but important in the larger political space. There can be perhaps other debates that we can put on the table. I think Rafizi had wanted to debate Wan Faisal on a number of things before. I'm not sure whether they would see me as a objective moderator. That could be something that we could look forward to. But yeah, I mean, looking back, I also remember some of the other things that we did. I remember us, for example, going to Kuala Kubu Baru, right, for the by-election, and also to talk to different people. Many people who are sort of like maybe not so prominent. They are not community leaders. They are more like some Orang Asli people. Some of the traders that we spoke to, even some random people in a restaurant who were working as mechanics in PJ but had to commute from KKB and all that kind of stuff. So, were those things interesting for you?
Oh yeah, I think it would be quite cool if we can also go to different states, talk to the locals about policies, about their concern. I think more importantly, sometimes I feel one of the main tool or one of the main purpose of this show is not just about the popularity, but rather helping Malaysians to be able to voice out their opinion. Because I always find this a very challenging one for people, right? We get our news or I would say communication towards government is very often one-sided. It is not two-sided. I mean, how many Malaysians actually really do go to a forum? How often does a MP or a minister really organize an open forum where he himself is there to listen?
Not many. Not many. Yeah.
But having...
To be fair, somebody like Rafizi, he does do it quite often. He has these kinds of open forums where he takes in questions and all that. But I'm not really sure whether those questions lead to certain actions being undertaken. Right?
That's right. Yeah. So I feel like one of the purpose of the channel is also to be able to help to voice up. So the government can hear it, people in power can hear it. And sometimes at the end of the day, it's just like why every politician or like many people in power they will listen to news publisher because when it's being spoken up, people have to pay some attention. It kind of helped to be a part of the change of voice, right? Like just like in the early days when we found about Bersih, it was through newspaper, it was through Facebook, it was through all this. And I think media is in my opinion, one of the places that you can really mobilize people for greater good.
Yeah, so on that point, I've also thought about this as we curate this podcast and plan out the program and things like that, right? There have been a few episodes where I've added a bit of spice. I think one of the most watched episodes is the episode where we talk about the DAP state leadership, and then I brought up Charlie and all that. So I can assure you, most of my colleagues in the DAP watched the episode. Not all of them will feedback to me, some did. But there have also been some friends from PKR and other parties who have also watched the episode. So now, most people, I think, within the party and also within Pakatan Harapan would know who Charlie is. And then I think the other episode that got not so many views, but some as well, is when I explained why Gobind didn't get into the top 15, to be re-elected as DAP Selangor state chairman, which I shared with him and his staff as well. And many people did come back to me and say, actually, I think you were quite fair to him, maybe even a bit kind to him. That's one way in which I can communicate to not just my former colleagues, in DAP, my fellow party members in the DAP and Pakatan Harapan, but also the larger audience wanting to understand what happens behind the scenes. So that's one way in which we can get more attention, the right kind of attention. And then the other one is by talking about public policies. And I know that people who are in the public policy space do hear what we are saying on issues like, for example, 5G, on issues like the National Digital ID, on issues like PADU and whatnot. And then I try to amplify that communication, that message by issuing press statements where I give some recommendations how to improve, which I do as well in this. So I think that kind of process is one that's quite valuable, which keeps me coming back and wanting to do this podcast on a weekly basis.
Let's talk a little bit about when you started this podcast together. Honestly, I didn't expect that you will really commit to come every week. And on my end here, when I started this podcast, I would say making profit out of the podcast or making revenue out of the podcast was not my main purpose. So for those who are watching, you know that I own a media company, and when we run media company, we run brands. The main number one goal is actually to make money, obviously, right? For this one, it's actually that wasn't the number one goal.
It's an investment.
Yeah, the investment is really about being able to voice up as Malaysians and hopefully bring certain amount of change in our government, right? Or facilitate it, or facilitate people's bravery to speak up and so on and so forth. And if let's say we end up being able to make a good revenue out of it, I'll be very happy as well. If not, it's fine.
Sponsors or for next year, think about us when you want to do certain campaigns.
Yes, yeah.
We're open to be communicated.
Yes. Now, for yourself, because you're a person who's very busy. You have many things to you have many things that you need to handle.
Yeah, because I'm botak, I can wear different hats. It's very easy. Yeah.
So, what brought you back? What made you decided to really carve out time? Because there were times that also like I'll be honest, there were times that I feel like, hey, maybe this week a bit lazier. But you are the guy who will say, hey, no, I'm gonna come to the office, really, we're gonna shoot. Right? And you come all the way, you're not like staying nearby here.
And also prepare the agenda.
That's items. Right. Like today, you actually took Grab all the way from home, which is rather far away.
From Bangi.
From Bangi area. Yeah. So my question to you is, what keeps you going?
Okay, a few responses to that. I think firstly, I found that I really enjoyed doing the podcast with you because it was a way for me to first to ask you questions in terms of what your viewpoint was as the man on the street, so that I can use that opportunity to explain to you whether that point of view is valid or not. So it's the educational process that I enjoy, very much, which is why I'm back in education, starting this politics, philosophy, and economics program at Taylor's that will be launched next year. So that kind of educational thing really, I think, keeps me going. Second thing is, I think I also wanted to get off my chest my own viewpoints on certain things that were happening in the government. And, there were enough news items, enough, I think, inputs that were necessary for me to voice out with regards to public policies that I'm familiar with. So that, I think, is also an important channel. And then the third thing is to want to try to grow be part and parcel of the growth of the podcast ecosystem in Malaysia. Of course, we have to acknowledge, keluar sekejap in opening up doors. And I think the fact that they've opened up doors allows us to step into that ecosystem and contribute our unique voices together with others who are in this space. So I'm really interested to see how we can grow this space. And probably, in 2025, I really like the idea of doing a roadshow, going to, let's say, Sabah or Sarawak, to talk to policymakers there, to talk to the man on the street, the person on the street, to ask them about different things. Maybe doing something a little bit more in-depth because Sabah state elections is happening next year, something that we'll talk about in the next segment as well. And even, going to the small towns in Peninsular Malaysia, interviewing people, talking to the uncle and aunties, eating at certain restaurants, to sort of like showcase what life is in small towns in Malaysia. That's something that I think maybe we can plan for in 2025 that will keep the creative juices flowing.
That's nice. Now, I have one more question. If you were to rate yourself as a politician, as a podcaster, reflecting back and coming to today, I want you to rate yourself on two areas, right? The first area is that which one did you enjoy more? Do you enjoy being a podcaster, commenting, or being a politician where much more so many things that you need to say has to be more filtered?
I'll answer that question in this way. I would say I enjoy and learned more from being a politician because the scope is much wider. You also suffer more as a politician. When you take holidays, you're also scared, whether there's going to be a flood in your area or not. So I enjoyed that more. But I think right now, in my current sort of like stage of life, in terms of my career path, I am seeing the benefits of being able to use my experience that I've gathered in the political arena to educate the larger public on important public policy issues. Right. So this is something that I enjoy doing now, and I'm learning maybe in a different way in terms of trying to communicate these kinds of intricacies behind the curtain kind of takes to you guys, our audience.
Do you think you are a better politician or better podcaster?
I would say that I was an effective politician in terms of taking care of my constituency, in terms of taking care of national issues and making my voice heard on those. But I was not a very good politician in terms of taking care of my relationship with some of my party elders, which led to me not being elected into the CEC. But that's fine. I think it's all a learning process. So every politician will have their strengths and weaknesses. So it's good that I understand what my strengths and weaknesses were. I think as a podcaster, I'm in a more comfortable position in terms of what I want to communicate. I would say I still have a lot to learn, but probably have made less mistakes as a podcaster compared to when I was a politician.
I guess the mistakes are not so consequential.
Correct. Yeah. So maybe some audience members, listeners would not like a particular episode or would not like a certain take. They may just leave some comment or not click like for that particular episode. But in politics, the consequences are much bigger and much more serious. But it's okay. That's part and parcel of the game, and I've enjoyed both.
That's right. Yeah. I think I have to say that knowing you for 1 year now. I still remember my first episode talking to you. I was actually very scared. Yeah, because first time really talking to someone who was from an ex-ministerial position, being someone who don't have a lot of political friends. I mean, I work with political people a little bit, right?
But you don't know them that well.
I don't know them as a very casual and candid
So maybe to finish up this segment, how about yourself? How do you think you have progressed as a podcaster, talking and commenting about politics and public policies over the year?
I think this podcast made me grow a lot. Why is it so? It's because actually what a lot of people do not know is that they may see me as like very confident and whatnot. But usually when I talk to someone like, let's say a politician or a minister or a CEO, sometimes I am also a human. I'll be a bit scared.
Yep.
Especially if the person is much more senior or more experienced. So I will have a little bit of stage fright. Yeah. So I do not know what to say. I also go blank, right? And I think if you recall my first 2 sessions with you, I was less responsive. You have to probe me more. And sometimes I dare not say. And then after that, I'll keep asking you, hey, if I say that, okay.
But after that? After a while, you're much more comfortable.
After a while, I'm more confident. I mean, these days also, I'm like, hey, bro. And it made me realize that all of us are just humans. Sometimes we do not need to be, we need to be respectful, but we need not be afraid of people.
Afraid of voicing out your views.
Afraid of voicing out views. And yes, to a certain extent, there are certain people who are definitely way more experienced than us and have a lot more maybe influence and so on. But maybe don't think of yourself as too small also, but rather that question should be irrelevant.
Everyone should have a voice.
Yes, everyone should have a voice. So I think that's something that I learned and it really helped me a lot. So these days when I speak to even others who I see them as much more atas, I'm not so affected.
Okay.
I just
be yourself.
Be myself and speak up.
Yep.
Yeah, but be respectful at the same time.
Yep. So I think, it's a good way to end this section, talking about our own experiences as a podcaster on the Are We OK podcast over the past year. And we continue to seek your support in many areas, especially if, let's say, we're going to have live shows next year. So be right back to talk about our expectations for 2025. Welcome back to the final segment of the final episode of the Are We OK podcast for 2024. And what a year it has been. In this final segment, we're going to look forward towards some of the big events and also big policy issues that Malaysia will face in 2025. And I'll go through a list and I'd like you, Peter, to respond to those, to see what is your reaction in terms of those events and also those policy announcements. So on the domestic side, in terms of policy announcements and also implementation, I think the biggest thing and the biggest challenge that this government has to face is the implementation and rollout of the petrol subsidy rationalisation program, right? And this is headed by Rafizi Ramli with support from the Ministry of Finance. And this will be something that I think will draw up a lot of attention because people are waiting for the definition of what T15 is. How is it going to be tied into locality? How is it going to be measured? And then also the process by which you are able to claim back your petrol subsidies or basically having this kind of two-tiered pricing system. How is it going to be used for those who are going to pay the lower rate versus the higher rate, right? So this is a big challenge. There may be some fits and starts along the way. I still stand by what I said earlier, a couple of episodes ago, that I think the government may not have the kind of political willpower to really implement it by the middle of the year because of different implementation issues, and they may kick it down the road.
Regarding the RON 95 subsidy, I think that would be one of the largest challenge. Until this point, I am unsure how they're going to implement it, obviously. It doesn't seem like there's going to be a clear way of how to do it. I got a feeling that they may push through it, but in the form of just a cash handout. I think that could be the way that they go forward with it, simply because it will be the easiest way, less complaint, and also at least it is shown as you have done something, and you can also reverse that quite easily.
That would be a backup option.
Yeah. So I got a feeling they will go for that, and I hope because at least shown as you're doing something.
Okay. So at least be able to execute,
Yeah.
important
That's right.
policy announcement and
That's right. Rather than
implementation.
kicking it down the road,
Sure. So some of the other policy announcements that I'm looking forward to is the signing of the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. Reports indicate that the two prime ministers will meet for the leaders' retreat on the 6th and 7th of January, and that the signing is going to take place on the 7th of January. I think there has been some back and forth on this. Some areas where it's been hard to get consensus on both sides. But regardless, I think we need to start somewhere. I think we need to see something on paper that will ease the movement of people, goods and services, and then also lastly, some form of incentive structure. And we can build trust from that and then see how the private sector can align. And then we can take that as a step moving forward, especially with the RTS coming in, the MRT line connecting Singapore to Johor in 2026. So that would be an important catalyst towards developing southern Johor and maybe set a a signpost for other SEZ locations to be identified and other agreements to be discussed and also implemented. Not just between Malaysia and Indonesia or Malaysia and Thailand, but maybe other ASEAN countries.
I think that would be something that's quite exciting. I'm also really looking forward to the Johor SEZ. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of things that can happen there with Singapore being more and more populated, and they're also looking for a way out. And Malaysia, if we can actually really do it very well, I think that could be a game changer for Malaysia in the next few years.
Besides JSSEZ, I think there are other policy announcements and legislative changes that will be important. The government is going to propose a national climate bill that is under the Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability Ministry. This is under Nick Nazmi. There's going to be more announcements, I think, on the energy transition and water transformation side. This is Petra Ministry. Under MITI, of course, I think there should be some indication whether or not we are moving forward on the EU-Malaysia free trade agreement discussions. Also, the details of the national semiconductor strategy, details of the new investment incentive framework where we'll see a preview of in the first quarter of next year. So all these policy announcements and also implementation is something we'll continue to monitor and discuss on this show. On the elections front, one important event that will happen next year would be the Sabah state elections. And we know that Sabah is very complicated with different parties, local parties, national parties, which coalition is going to work with whom, GRS with PH with BN, and then you have people like Musa Aman that has been appointed as the governor in Sabah. So a lot of different moving parts. And on this front, I do hope that we can find a time for us to go to Sabah, right, for about a week to interview and talk to different people, go to different parts of Sabah and let people see the different dynamics that are happening, in KK versus a place like Kundasang that's up in the mountains versus a place like Sempurna that's a lot of tourist areas but a lot of issues to do with the Sea Dayaks or the Bajau Lauts, So very, very diverse state. Have you traveled a lot in Sabah before?
No, I've only been in KK.
Okay.
I think it was the Kundasang.
Okay. That's to climb Mount Kinabalu, is it?
But I think one of the cool things that we should really do is probably go down to Sabah and just do a 1 week trip, right? And go to each different area to actually explore what's the main concerns of the people, right? And I think that will kind of play a role of our channel to actually help people to understand or to voice up towards hopefully the future government.
And also listen to the views from the men and the women on the street and in the markets and so on, right? Yeah, and if anyone wants to sponsor that particular episode, please message us and then we'll get back to you. Talking about elections, not just Sabah elections, I think we have to look forward to the Singapore general elections as well, which is due next year under the leadership of the new Prime Minister, Lawrence Wong. And also, I think, an invigorated opposition that will put up maybe some fresh candidates. I'm sure the current government in Singapore under the PAP will also put up their fresh candidates. And I think this will be a different kind of elections in Singapore because you have new leadership. You're sort of like moving away from the Lee Hsien Loong era to a Lawrence Wong era. So what kind of messaging and also what kind of candidates that he wants to put on the table. I definitely will be going down to Singapore to be an election tourist during that time. And also maybe to share my observations even in this podcast. Maybe even to interview some of the candidates that are contesting as well. So something to look out for. Would you be interested to?
Oh yeah, that would be great, man. Yeah, maybe we should do that. It's smaller than Sabah, so easier.
Smaller than Sabah, yes.
Probably from one cafe go to the other cafe, you can settle 2 interviews.
Yeah, easier to get around. But of course, shooting costs in Singapore may be a bit more expensive. And also, I think in Singapore, because we're going in as foreigners, there may be more restrictions, right? So that one I also need to navigate that.
Why are you coming, sir? To do an election coverage.
Oh, then okay, please leave your camera back. You can come in and just enjoy.
Maybe you get a media pass. Never know.
Yes, we'll. I know some people so
maybe you can even go get a proper media pass and do proper media coverage.
We'll have to see about that. Yes. Okay, so that's something to look out for. And then also ASEAN. The fact that Malaysia is hosting ASEAN.
Yes. That will be exciting.
And we'll have a more substantive episode on this where we will invite a former diplomat to come and talk to us on this. Because there will be 2 ASEAN summits, one in the middle of the year and then one at the end of the year. And the one at the end of the year usually gets more attention because that's when we have the ASEAN EU summit, the ASEAN plus 3, even inviting a US leader to come. It will be, I think, something to look out for. And then different events like the ASEAN Finance Ministers meeting, the Central Bank Governors meetings, and also the different policy agendas that will be put on the table as well. So that's something to look forward to. And then last but not least, Trump 2.0.
That's right, yeah.
The impact on the world, the impact on Malaysia, the impact on ASEAN.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of things to talk about, and hopefully we can get good guests to come and appear on our podcast to talk about these different things and then to also share their views.
That's right. I was thinking about it. ASEAN will be really exciting with Trump being the new president of America, right?
Yes.
Because there's this whole complication. He's the guy who started the whole US-China trade war. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, not say started
Yeah,
but
or
at least
escalated it
He
lah.
escalated it lah. And today now he's the guy again. And recently he's also making quite interesting moves that like you're like, whoa, I didn't see this coming from him.
Appointing Elon Musk, as the head of
Yes.
the Department of Government Efficiency,
Yeah.
and also having a few other controversial appointments to his cabinet. So a lot of interesting sort of like things to monitor, to look out for policy alignments and adjustments that Malaysia has to make, ASEAN has to make.
How's he gonna handle BRICS?
How's he gonna look at BRICS?
ASEAN, that'll be really interesting. To
Which will give this podcast also a lot of content to not just talk about it, just the 2 of us, but also getting experts to come and share their viewpoints as well.
That's right.
For the benefit of you, our audience. So, any final thoughts before we end off 2024?
Nope. Just hope that everyone will enjoy yourself in these final last few days on 2024. For those of you who have not subscribed, do hit the subscribe and turn on the notification so that when a new episode comes up, it will be shown to you. And nonetheless, I think we have to say that we are going to take a quick New Year break.
Yes.
So this will be our final episode, like Ken Ming has mentioned. And after that, we will be back.
We will be back in 2025 with a bang. And thank you very much for all your support. Before we go, I also like to make a plug for the Mr. Money channel because I myself volunteered to be on your channel, the Mr. Money channel, to share some of my sort of like career tips.
That's
and
right.
also to talk about some of the sort of like a planning process that I go through in terms of thinking about what I want to achieve in 2025. So I'm looking forward to the episode that we will tape in 2025. In the meantime, see you next time on the Are We OK podcast.
See you.